A waitress finds her childhood photo in a billionaire's wallet, and the truth shattered her life. The diner was almost empty when it happened. Richard Hale, a billionaire, known from magazines and TV, a name Naomi had only ever heard from far away, stood up from the torn booth. As he pulled on his coat, the wallet slipped from his pocket and hit the floor with a heavy thud. Naomi bent to retrieve it. A photograph slid free. She picked it up, intending to slip it back inside, but the world tilted the moment her eyes focused. It was her. A 5-year-old Naomi, braids tied with purple ribbons, gap-toothed smile wide at the Greenmont County Fair. She remembered the day, the carousel that squeaked, the sticky sweetness of cotton candy on her hands, and on the back, in blue ink, a note she would recognize anywhere: Naomi, age 5, Serena. Her mother's handwriting, her mother's hand. Naomi's breath caught. Her pulse thundered as she turned the photo toward him. "Why do you have this?" For a fraction of a second, something broke in his expression, a flicker of recognition, even longing. Then the mask of wealth and power slammed back into place. "That's none of your concern," Richard said coldly. His voice was sharp, final, the tone of a man accustomed to ending conversations on command. He plucked the photo from her trembling hand, slid it back into his wallet, and placed a crisp bill on the counter. Without another word, he strode out into the night, his shadow vanishing through the glass door. Naomi stood frozen, the taste of iron in her mouth. None of your concern? It was her face, her childhood, her mother's writing. How could one of the richest men in America carry a piece of her life in his pocket? She stumbled through the rest of her shift, pouring coffee and bussing plates with mechanical motions. The photo burned in her mind. By the time she trudged home, exhaustion pressed heavy on her, but sleep never came. On her thin mattress, she lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling. Her mother's soft coughs drifted from the next room. Naomi closed her eyes, but all she saw was Richard Hale's face, the look in his eyes before he shut her out. Questions hammered at her. How long had he carried it? Why her mother's writing? Why her face? She remembered being a little girl, asking her mother about her father, and watching Serena's eyes darken with silence. For years she'd swallowed the ache, convincing herself the answers didn't matter. But now a billionaire had walked into her diner with proof that he knew. Proof he had tried to snatch back and bear. Naomi rolled onto her side, gripping her blanket until her knuckles ached. Her chest tightened with a fury she couldn't name. She couldn't let this go. By dawn, one truth was certain: she would find Richard Hale again, and this time, he would not walk away without giving her answers. By morning, Naomi's exhaustion had hardened into resolve. She dressed in her best, though her diner uniform still clung to her in spirit, and rode the bus into the city. She had never been to this part of town before, the streets lined with glass towers and doormen in suits, but she knew exactly which building was his. Hale Global rose into the clouds, its name stamped in silver across the entrance. It was his empire, untouchable and vast, and she was walking straight into it. The lobby was all marble and brass, polished so brightly, Naomi could see her reflection in the floor. Men and women in tailored clothes swept past her without a glance, their lives measured in power lunches and private cars. Naomi clutched her bag to her side and approached the desk. Her voice shook at first, but steadied as she spoke. "I need to see Richard Hale." The receptionist raised a brow, asked for an appointment, and when Naomi said no, she almost laughed. But Naomi's insistence carried weight, and after a long, hushed phone call, the woman nodded her toward the elevator. Naomi's pulse thudded as the elevator carried her upward. The numbers climbed higher than she had ever stood in her life. When the doors finally opened, the sight stole her breath. The office stretched wall to wall with glass, revealing the city sprawled below like a map. Behind a massive desk sat Richard Hale himself, the billionaire who had carried her photo in his wallet, the man who had brushed her off as though she didn't matter. His eyes lifted when she stepped inside, and for a brief moment, the mask cracked again. "You shouldn't be here," he said. His tone was sharp, controlled, but Naomi saw the tension in the way his hands curled against the desk. She took a step closer, her voice steadier than she felt. "Then explain why you have my picture. Explain why my mother's handwriting is in your wallet." He stared at her for a long, heavy silence. Naomi thought he might call security. Instead, his face drained of color. "I told you," he said at last, the words clipped, as though they cost him something. "That's none of your concern." Naomi's chest tightened. She refused to back down. "It is my concern. It's my face. My mother's words. If you think you can carry pieces of my life and walk away, you're wrong." Her voice broke, but she didn't care. He had power, money, everything, and still he looked cornered. Richard pushed back his chair and rose. For the first time, Naomi saw not the billionaire from headlines, but a man burdened by something heavier than wealth. He walked toward the window, the city glowing behind him, then turned with eyes darker than she expected. "You really don't know, do you?" he said quietly. Naomi's heart pounded. "Know what?" he exhaled, his shoulders sagging as if decades of silence pressed against him. "Naomi, I am your father." The words struck like a blow. She staggered back, gripping her bag, her mind racing. Her father, the man her mother never spoke of, the man who left, and now he stood before her, cloaked in wealth and regret. Naomi's throat ached, her anger surging past disbelief. "No," she said, shaking her head. "My father abandoned us. He never came back." Richard's jaw tightened, and his voice grew rough. "I wanted to, but I wasn't given the choice." Naomi's fists curled at her sides. "Then tell me why." His eyes closed, the truth breaking loose like a wound he could no longer bind. "It wasn't poverty that kept me away, it was prejudice. My family told me if I stayed with your mother, I would lose everything. My inheritance, my name, my future. They could not accept her. They could not accept you." Naomi's stomach twisted. Rage and heartbreak warred inside her as the city glittered in the glass behind him. For years she had imagined her father as weak, faceless, forgotten. Now she knew the truth, and it was worse than anything she had dreamed. Naomi left the tower with her chest burning. The city moved around her in blurs of gray and glass, but nothing broke through the storm inside her. A billionaire had just told her he was her father. Worse, he admitted he had abandoned her because his family would not accept a black woman and her child. The words echoed in her skull like a verdict she hadn't asked for. By the time she reached home, dusk had fallen. The small apartment smelled faintly of broth simmering on the stove, and her mother's soft humming carried from the kitchen. For a moment, Naomi stood in the doorway, watching Serena, the woman who had worked 2 jobs, who had gone without comfort so Naomi never had to, who had never spoken a word about the man who left. Her throat tightened with fury and grief. She stepped inside, her voice sharper than she intended. "Mom, why didn't you tell me?" Serena turned, a wooden spoon in her hand. Confusion flickered across her face. "Tell you what, baby?" Naomi pulled the chair back and dropped into it. Her hands trembled as she laid the truth on the table. "I saw him. Richard Hale. He came into the diner. His wallet fell and I found a photo. It was me, 5 years old, with your handwriting on the back." Her voice cracked. "He told me he's my father." The spoon slipped against the pot. Serena gripped the counter, her knuckles white. For a long moment she said nothing, her breath shallow. Then she lowered herself into the chair across from Naomi, her eyes wet but unyielding. "Yes," she whispered. "He's your father." Naomi's chest clenched. "You knew he was alive all this time. You knew who he was." Serena shook her head fiercely. "I knew who he was, but not where. Not after I left. Naomi, I had to leave. You don't know what his parents were like. They spat at me, called me names I won't repeat. They told him he'd lose everything if he stayed. And when he chose them, I swore you would never grow up begging for love from people who thought you were less." Her words hit like stones. Naomi wanted to argue, wanted to scream that she had a right to know, but the look in her mother's eyes stopped her. Serena's pain was carved deep, like lines no time could smooth. "I raised you with dignity," Serena said, her voice steady now. "I would not have them poison you with their hate, but he carried that photo? All these years?" Naomi nodded, tears stinging her eyes. "Yes. And now he wants to explain. He says he didn't have a choice." Serena's lips pressed into a thin line. She reached across the table, her calloused hand closing over Naomi's. "He had a choice. He just didn't choose us. Remember that." Naomi bit her lip, torn between fury and the desperate hunger to know more. For the first time in her life, the silence around her father was broken, and what lay beneath it was uglier than she imagined. But the photograph was proof. His eyes had been proof. The story wasn't finished, and Naomi knew she couldn't stop now. Naomi didn't wait long before returning to him. The photograph had torn open something inside her, and her mother's warning had only made it burn hotter. She needed to look him in the eye again. She needed to hear more than excuses. When she walked back into the glass tower, Richard Hale was waiting. His assistant led her into the office without protest this time, as though he had ordered it. He stood at the window, the city lights glittering behind him like jewels. For a moment he looked less like a billionaire and more like a man bracing for judgment. "You wanted answers," he said, turning toward her. His face seemed older than the night before. "I'll give them to you. But you won't like them." Naomi folded her arms across her chest, then started talking. He sank into his chair, elbows resting on the desk. When I told you it wasn't your concern, I was trying to protect you. Not from me, but from the storm that will come if people know who you are. His gaze hardened. I have another family, a wife, 2 children grown. They don't know about you. And when they do, they will see you as nothing but a threat to everything they believe belongs to them. Naomi's stomach clenched. So you're saying I should stay quiet? Pretend I don't exist so they feel safe? I'm saying they won't welcome you, Richard said. They will fight you. They will try to erase you. And I may not be here to shield you when they do. Her eyes narrowed. What do you mean, not be here? He looked down at his hands, fingers trembling slightly. For a man who commanded empires, the weakness in him was jarring. I'm sick, Naomi. Terminal. The doctors give me months, maybe less. I've built wealth beyond measure, but it means nothing if I leave this world with you still believing I didn't want you. Naomi's throat tightened, but the anger flared hotter than pity. You had decades to find us. You had every resource in the world, and you're telling me you waited until you were dying to come clean? His voice cracked. I never stopped searching. Your mother disappeared, and your grandparents, my parents, made sure I couldn't find you. By the time I realized how much time had slipped away, it was gone, and now I am running out of the little that remained. Naomi shook her head, tears stinging her eyes. You don't get to walk back into my life because you're dying. You don't get to use your illness as a reason to be forgiven. Richard stood, his voice raw. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for the truth to live between us before I go. I need you to know that I never stopped carrying you. That photograph has been with me every single day of my life. The weight of his words pressed against her, but Naomi's fury held firm. And now you want me to step into a war with your family, into their hate, into their wealth, into their prejudice. Why should I? He didn't answer right away. His chest rose and fell, the silence heavy. Finally he whispered, because Naomi, you are my daughter, and I cannot leave this world without knowing if you believe that. Naomi turned toward the glass wall, the city glowing beneath her feet. She had spent her life invisible, forgotten, fatherless. Now the truth stood before her, dressed in wealth and dying in regret, and still she could not decide whether to reach for it or to walk away forever. It was Richard who arranged it. Naomi hadn't asked to meet them, but he insisted she needed to understand the root of it all. His parents were the reason he had walked away, the reason Serena raised her alone. Naomi entered the Hale estate with her heart pounding. The mansion loomed like a fortress, its halls filled with portraits of stern faces in gilded frames. Every step felt like trespassing into a world that had once decided she was unworthy of it. In the sitting room, 2 elderly figures waited. Mr. and Mrs. Hale sat upright on velvet chairs, silver hair neatly combed, eyes sharp with judgment that hadn't dulled with age. Their wealth surrounded them, but it was their silence that cut Naomi deeper. They looked at her the way people study a problem, not a person. This is her, Richard said quietly, standing at Naomi's side. His voice carried both defiance and shame. This is my daughter. Mrs. Hale's lips pressed into a thin line. So it's true, she said, her words clipped, every syllable laced with disdain. I had hoped your youthful mistake was behind us. Naomi's fists clenched at her sides. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, warning her about the venom these people carried. Still, hearing it aloud scorched her in a way she hadn't prepared for. My mother's name is Serena Johnson, Naomi said, her voice steady though her chest burned. She raised me alone while you sat in this house and convinced your son to abandon us. You told him we weren't good enough. You told him I wasn't good enough. Mr. Hale adjusted his cufflinks, eyes narrowing. Your mother didn't belong in this family. And neither do you. The words hit Naomi like a slap. For a moment, her vision blurred with fury. You took my father from me, she said, her voice rising. You left my mother to suffer. You are the reason I grew up without him. And even now you sit here, surrounded by everything money can buy, and you dare to look at me as if I don't exist. Mrs. Hale lifted her chin, her tone like ice. You exist, Miss Johnson. Just not as one of us. Richard flinched at the words, but Naomi stood tall, her anger giving her strength. I don't need to be one of you, she spat, but you will not erase me. You will not erase my mother. You will not erase the truth. The silence that followed was heavy, the kind that cracked through the walls of old lies. Naomi's breath came in sharp bursts, her heart pounding in her ears. She turned toward Richard, who looked pale, caught between the family he had built his empire on, and the daughter who now stood before him. His parents' scorn lingered in the air, daring him to deny her. And Naomi knew the next words out of his mouth would change everything. The meeting with Richard's parents left Naomi raw, but the storm had only begun. Within days, whispers spread. The press caught wind of her existence. Photographers lingered outside the diner where she worked, cameras flashing as though her life was a spectacle. Strangers muttered her name as she walked to the bus stop. And then came the summons. Richard's wife and children wanted to see her, not out of welcome, but out of fear. The confrontation took place in another of Richard's homes, sleek and modern, all glass and steel. Naomi stepped inside, and 3 figures waited, his wife, immaculate in pearls, and his 2 grown children, polished and confident in the way of people who had never known hunger. Their eyes cut across her like knives. "So, this is the girl," his wife said coolly, her tone more accusation than greeting. "The waitress who suddenly believes she's part of this family." Naomi's chest burned, but she stood her ground. "I don't believe anything. I know what's true. He carried my picture for decades. He admitted who I am." Richard's son scoffed, arms crossed. "Convenient timing. He's dying, and you appear out of nowhere. You think we're handing you a share of what we built?" Naomi's eyes narrowed. "I didn't come for your money. I came for the truth." Richard stepped forward, his face drawn, his strength faltering more each day. "Enough," he rasped. "Naomi is my daughter. That is fact, whether you accept it or not." His wife's gaze hardened. "And what do you expect us to do? Rewrite history? Invite her into this family while the world watches? You're not the only one with a legacy at stake." The air grew heavier. Naomi felt the full weight of their hostility pressing down, but she would not bow. "I survived without you, without him. I don't need your acceptance. But you don't get to deny I exist." Richard swayed. One hand braced on the edge of the table. His illness was stealing more each day, but his voice still carried the weight of command. "She is my blood," he said, "and I will not leave this world pretending otherwise." Silence settled. Naomi stood in the middle of their world of glass and wealth, her heart torn between fury and longing. She had her mother's dignity, her father's acknowledgement, and the hatred of those who would rather erase her. The limousine waited outside. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind. "He had a choice. He didn't choose us." Richard's trembling hand reached toward her again, desperate, pleading. Naomi's chest tightened. She could step into that world, claim a place among them, and risk being swallowed by their scorn. Or she could turn away, stand beside the mother who never left, and let Richard's legacy end without her. The decision loomed sharp and unbearable. Richard's hand trembled, caught between command and desperation, while his wife and children stood rigid in their contempt. Her throat ached with words she couldn't form. For years she had wanted to know who her father was. Now she knew, and yet nothing about this moment felt like belonging. The truth was here, but the answers were not. She looked at him and saw 2 men at once, the billionaire who had once chosen ambition over love, and the broken father who now begged her to heal the years he had thrown away. She turned and walked away, her footsteps sharp against the polished floor. The doors opened at her touch, and the chill of the night rushed in. She crossed the threshold and kept moving, carrying with her the weight of everything unsaid. Outside, the night swallowed her. Streetlights glowed across the pavement, cold winds stung her face, and the city stretched out uncaring before her. She slowed only once, her breath shaking, her fists clenched at her sides. No answers had come, none ever might. But the silence that followed her was its own kind of truth. Behind her, the doors stayed open. His world remained unfinished, and her choice had already been made. This is where Naomi's story stops, and where you take over. Should she turn back and take the hand of the father who abandoned her, or should she walk away forever and stand with the mother who never let her go? The truth is, we will never know, because the ending belongs to you. What would you have done in Naomi's place? Share your ending in the comments. We read every thought, and your perspective might change how others see this story. Thank you for being with us, and we'll see you in the next story on your screen.